Good morning, coffee moaners. How are you all doing? Nice to see you. I think Mark looks like, for those on podcast,
someone's just said I look like the Kingsman.
The Kingsman, but you also look like, well, you tell me, who's the character that you look like with those glasses?
I don't know.
In Thunderbirds.
Joe 90. Brains.
That's Brains. Right. That's
I thought
Dina.
It was Joe 90.
Brains from Thunderbirds.
No, that's just a description, Dina.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. A few syllables coming from over there, and they're all very, very, very funny.
So if you're new to the podcast or new to here, why there is a strange voice coming from another part of the house? That is my sister Dina, who is in the other room making a giant-sized gingerbread house for our Vlogmas. And Vlogmas started yesterday. Again, if nobody knows what that means, it's a Christmas reality show, and it goes out. Ours has been running for like 5 years now. It goes out from the 1st of December right through the 25th. I actually watched it last night, and I never watched myself. I laughed out loud.
Now, traditionally, Vlogmas is always about the kind of, aspirational, the perfect, the glistening.
The perfect tree, the perfect.
Asism.
Like even when they go in the perfect world, even like when they go and get a Christmas tree, they go and buy a Christmas tree. There's not a bit of rubbish anywhere, is there? I was watching. They don't get any pine needles in them.
No,
it all goes in the car.
Skewered with pine needles.
Yeah,
all over my hand.
The car it goes into the car perfectly, apart from maybe a little shuffle where they might have to go, and a leg goes up, and then it's perfect.
I mean, they don't need to take a shit in a bag for life, for example.
Mark.
Well, that's the kind of thing. Those are the kind of highlights of our Vlogmas.
Oh my God, I forgot. I've got something to download to show. We forgot the funny thing at the end.
Was it to take a shit?
Something. No. But anyway, so our Vlogmas is very reality. And because Mark knows most of the time I don't watch it, he puts in all the stuff he's not supposed to.
What was that thing Dina was spanking in her hand, asks Lee Durrant. Wouldn't you like to know?
Watch it again. But subscribe to the channel. Doesn't cost you anything. Hit the notification bell, and that way you'll be notified when we're live. And join us in the run up to Christmas. As I say, we will still be doing our news stuff here. We will still be campaigning for Gaza. We will still be doing all of that. But for us as well, because we need to sometimes check into just life in a more stupid way. Vlogmas will be all clear of any bad or horrible news in the world, and it will just be a place to just.
It's full of elves. It's full of festive dogs. It's full of. It's sometimes, and hopefully we might. Nanny Di pops up every now and then. There's all sorts of wonderful silliness that you can have fun with.
But on with coffee moaning now. So Gregg Wallace fights back.
Yeah, I think we should save that for a little bit. I've got all 3 of his remarkable stories on Instagram, which we'll have a listen to. And
as Dina so succinctly said, she came in this morning, we went, Gregg Wallace, she went, talk about digging a hole. Well, he dug 2 holes, didn't he? Middle class and middle-aged.
Yeah.
We were like...
If you haven't heard,
you'll know what we mean when we get to it.
It's astonishing to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. And we'll talk about that in a moment. The Terrorism Act being misused or exploited.
There's been a lot about this over the years. But this particular case has really sort of grabbed my attention.
This is about Emma Camillo.
Emma Camillo, a Swansea mother, the headline says, traumatised by arrest under the Terrorism Act. Now, Emma Camillo, 57, she runs her own homeopathy and Pilates business. Now, sue me if you like, but I don't know why it outrages me even more that she's homeopath and
so hang on a minute, is she one of the women that Gregg Wallace is having a pop at?
Well, Gregg Wallace will park him, but I'm sure she'd have something to say, having brought up a daughter with a conscience and a belief in fighting for what she believes in.
I'm bringing the story back.
And so basically, her daughter was one of the people that protested. No, I think they did actually go in and do something at. Do you call it munitions factory in Bristol?
Yeah.
You'll know the story, guys. It was a big story. Weapons manufacturer. Anyway, so middle of the night, she was arrested in her home in front of her son and her neighbours, taken out in handcuffs. had her 3 laptops and mobile phones seized. Now, it's not in this article, but I read in another article that her 16-year-old daughter was doing her homework on one of the laptops. Yeah. Dina said there's a reason to not do your homework. God. Anyway, so she's taken off. She was put in a van with her daughter that was being arrested, not the 16-year-old. They were each, I found this bit so terrifying, they were put in these cages in the back of the van, but there's no seatbelt and no lap belt. And she said he was driving at 120 miles an hour down the motorway. They were petrified. She was beside herself thinking, oh my God, my other child at home could lose her mum and her sister in one fell swoop, because it really felt like they were going to crash. So they got there, they were searched, they were transferred into the custody of counter-terrorism police. They were handed over. She was put in a filthy cell. She said there was still feces, dried on feces and everything from the last person that had been there. The lights were left on all night, which she described as psychological torture. Can you imagine the shock? So, because underneath the Terrorism Act, you don't have the same rights, like you don't have a right to a phone call or anything like that.
So what confused me about the story, and even though I read it, I still couldn't work this out. She was arrested. Where was she? Was she protesting?
She was in her home. She never did anything.
So they went to her home. Why did they arrest her if it was her daughter?
Well, exactly. Yeah.
But
she said, I'm an ordinary, hardworking, middle-class single parent whose life will never be the same. This story can happen to anyone due to the over-policing and the repression that's happening now in the UK. So her daughter was the one who went to the munitions factory, not her, but she was arrested. And you'll find out as we go on. So she's kept for 5 days. She wasn't allowed to contact anyone for the first 2 or 3 days. I can't remember. This is the difference, isn't it, on the Terrorism Act? Every time she left the cell, she would be searched, and then when she was taken back into the cell, she'd be searched again. Very humiliating, horrific. You know, you've been a law-abiding citizen. You've never had anything like this happen to you before. It'd just be just horrific. So it's the first 2 days. Yes, she was put in this horrible cell with the feces crusted around the toilet. Da-de-da. She said she spent the entire time in custody, terrified for her family and her clients, the impact on her business, as you would, which she'd really struggled to rebuild after the pandemic. And they took 5 days keeping her like that. And then I said, oh, yeah, she was innocent. So she was released without charge, without her belongings, without an apology, nothing, and just she was in the clothes and like she had these like expensive sandals on when she was arrested. She didn't get any of those back.
Yeah, and I saw some sort of keepsake earrings that her mother gave her.
Yeah,
I mean,
and since the police have,
I'm pulling it back.
So South Wales have now said that a complaint against the officers was being investigated. Who bets nothing will happen? So that's where we're at. There we go.
But I agree. This is wrong and this is bad. I do feel this is a story that lacks some of the vital details. So, in terms of the young girl who was the focus of the criminal investigation, so presumably Leona Cameo, who was the one who was protesting outside the weapons manufacturer or whatever, she was found guilty of violent disorder, criminal damage, and aggravated burglary.
Yeah, but obviously there was no violence against the person; it was against the property.
No, absolutely. And so what happened here was that essentially they arrested her mother because they went to her address as well. But there's no explanation as to what they even said. I mean,
but because you don't have to with the terrorism. This is the point. Why you can't understand it?
So why didn't they arrest the other daughter as well? It's also
she was a child. She obviously didn't think there was anything going on.
So that is the point? Is the lack of detail, the lack of
detail? That's what she's left with as well. No charges, nothing to bring, no charges.
Yeah.
Off you go. We can keep you for 5 days without any charges. under the Terrorism Act. And that's why there's a lot of campaigning around this, that they think it's being abused. That woman should have had a phone call. She should have had a
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And the idea, I don't know the exact details of the Terrorism Act, but I'm presuming that it's much more draconian. You're not allowed the standard kind of rights. You're not allowed, the lawyer call and all that kind of stuff.
Aaron, the Terrorism Act has been misused since its inception. Yeah, there's been a lot about this, hasn't there, over the years? It should never have been made. The fundamental point of it is to strip people of their legal and human rights in the name of national defence. And it is being totally in situations, that is an abuse of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no two ways about
well,
that.
especially, the part of it all that's absolutely outrageous, Nazeem says, under the terrorism laws, your rights are taken away so they can do this without charges. It's an intimidation tactic. Yeah, I've heard quite, and the weird thing is, I've heard quite a few of these stories in Wales, specifically.
It's definitely Wales. Like, I remember quite soon after October the 7th, there was that woman.
Wasn't there the hummus Hamas?
She was just taken off in the middle of the night, driven miles. She wasn't allowed her medication, all of this stuff. I think it was Swansea, but don't quote me on that because I can't remember. It was definitely Wales. And it was a similar thing. She was just held for 5 days and then just let go. And
I'm going to be sort of a bit contrarian on this. Whilst this is egregious, this is wrong, and I think the act can be exploited. I think there is definitely, because from all the stories I've seen, there is a focus of this sort of seeming to happen in Wales. I don't know why, but I'm not sensing or feeling that. I don't feel that we hear about this an enormous amount of the time. When it happens, it's absolutely wrong, and I think it could be used and can be used and the fact that there is no explanation after the event, I think what they should bake into this is, if you're arrested, if you're then interrogated, if you're taken away from your family with no right of any single legal right or redress whatsoever, and then are found innocent, you are entitled to know all of the information that led them to arrest you in the first place, presumably.
Well, maybe not under the Terrorism Act, but there is an investigation. So basically, she was brought from Swansea to Bristol, and her daughter was brought from London to Bristol, and then was brought from London. Then they were both put in this van and sent high speed, blue lit all the way. I just found that just horrifying. And I think it's really, really important to speak out about things like this because who knows? There's lots of people campaigning. Okay, she did break the law. Her daughter, there was a group of them. They broke into the factory and they damaged property.
Yeah.
As a campaigning against arms being sent to Israel, but there was nothing. Mum hadn't done anything at that point. Her daughter wasn't guilty; it was just alleged.
No,
I think it's really scary. Yeah. When you think about how it was all being whipped up around the time of the marches, that they were hate marches and they were putting all these police. It felt like. At that time, it felt scary. We can't lose the right parking to one side. The munitions part of the story, if you go back to that initial woman who was literally just campaigning, and
I suppose I agree entirely. Of course, entirely.
Flabby, doesn't it?
It's dark, it's dangerous, it's espionage, it's the deep state, it's all dark state, all that kind of stuff. And maybe we don't hear about it happening more because it's also undercover. But I'm not seeing this come through an awful lot. And when it does come through, I think it's really good that it's called out and it's named. And I saw another woman on Instagram. She had protested somewhere or posted something. Once again, we could in no way find out through her posts or through the story around her what she posted that had led to them to arrest her. But she also was arrested under the Terrorism Act. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is, I personally, using that kind of really neutral kind of lens of, is there enough evidence here to say there's a systemic state attempt to quash? I don't think there is. I think there's been as many attempts to criticise and opportunities to criticise the policing at some of the marches, suggesting they've been incredibly the other way. And like the BBC, there are parts of the BBC which are horrendously jaundiced and prejudiced against the Palestinians and pro-Israel and just repeating PR. And then every now and then you get Jeremy Bowen, you get various sectors in the BBC where it's not. So again, I think there's a problem with Welsh policing and this. If I was to say that there was a kind of nugget to pull out of this,
we need to check the numbers.
No. But I mean,
this popped up again in Wales.
Yeah, but it's odd. There's a cursory feeling that for some reason these stories keep popping up in Wales, which seems odd.
Anyway, I've been seeing the story go back and forth, and I just felt mum to mum. I just thought, my God, I just can't imagine how shocking. And it's like something, it's like she says, I will never be the same. You go, oh yeah, 5 days held in a cell.
Oh, look at this. This is
Treated
interesting.
like a
MeTube
criminal.
says the police themselves won't necessarily know all the details, as MI5, MI6 won't be under any obligation to give details to the police.
Well, this is it. I mean, they say it's an investigation, but will that just like that now just disappear? Yeah.
I mean, it strikes me that all they should have done was arrested the daughter if she'd broken the law, and that's it. The rest of it just doesn't make any sense. Okay.
Very scary.
Scary. Shall we do Gregg Wallace? Shall we have a chat about Gregg? Does anyone know? If you don't know who Gregg Wallace is, he's the co-host, or was the co-host, co-judge of MasterChef. In all its different guises, professional, celebrity. Did he do the junior one with you? Was he the?
No, I did it. The junior. I was the judge on the junior one with John Turode.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, so he obviously has been sort of suspended from his role on MasterChef. A flurry of accusations over the weekend revolving around inappropriate language, lewd behaviour. I think 3 or 4, it could be defined as sexual assaults have happened.
Have been alleged.
Alleged, exactly. And so the BBC has done its thing, which is we're going to investigate, and God only knows, we could find something out in another 6 years. Who knows?
Yeah, so at the moment, we're just in a place of allegations.
Yeah.
So nothing has been proven yet. There's going to be investigations, da-di-da-di-da. It's been rolling on, hasn't it, for a few days now. And we touched on it actually on Friday on Loose Women, because there was also the unbelievable tweet
we touched on that too. Yeah,
from Rod Stewart.
Yeah.
It was like, so setting allegations aside, just that in itself felt it felt like another wagger for Christie.
Well, I'd pay good money to see Rod Stewart and Gregg Wallace go head to head in a ring. I don't think
so anyway, so years ago, 17 years ago, because I was pregnant at the time with Kiki.
Yeah.
I was a contestant on MasterChef, did win it. And I actually quite liked Gregg. And actually we went on and we made another programme with Gregg,
I shared on Friday how I found it very agreeable.
And over the years, people have said, oh, what did you think of Gregg Wallace? I've never heard any of this sort of stuff, sexual stuff. I never heard any of that stuff. But I've said, he's like, definitely was a Barrow boy. He was like, a bit sort of rough around the edges. But
unrehabilitated man.
But I didn't find him offensive. I didn't find him offensive. I found him quite funny. I found him very hardworking and professional. Having next been a judge, after that being a judge on the children's one, my God, I had a whole new respect for both of them for their job, because it is incredibly hard to try freezing cold food, some of which is really disgusting, and still be sort of kind. So I would say over the years, I've just thought quite fondly of Gregg. And would say that to anyone that asked me. These allegations came out, and I just was like, felt so uncomfortable with the amount and what was being said. And I was like, oh my God. I'm also very aware that people, like, what I love to do, like if there's been like a really any sort of famous person that I come across, I love to ask researchers and makeup people, what were they like with you? Because I know that you can get a very different treatment from somebody if you're on the telly, So, but I didn't have that kind of relationship with production, because you just like competition. So I really genuinely have never heard a single thing along these lines from Gregg. And so when I saw his stories at the weekend, to be quite frank, I was horrified.
Well, just before we jump into the stories, because I think what was interesting, when we talked on Friday on Coffee Moaning 2, I talked about the fact that, interestingly, and I shared this fact, I found him just like you. I would describe him in exactly the same way. I found him incredibly agreeable, very professional. We just got on with it. He had that sort of geezer chat and that geezer humour. But there was nothing untoward in anything that he'd said to me. He did sort of go great lengths to say, do apologise to Nads but But
I didn't know what he was
and I came back
apologising.
to Naz, and it did not like a big deal. It wasn't like overemphasized. I said, "Oh, he kept saying sorry about something." She was like, "Anyway." When you saw all the stories break, admittedly that you haven't heard anything about him and all that kind of stuff, what was your first feeling? Were you surprised? Were you not surprised? Or were you?
No, I wasn't not surprised. I just never seen that or I heard that myself.
Right, okay.
But I'm never surprised.
Can I be honest with what I thought?
I'm never surprised when I hear stories. And now remember, everything is an allegation. We have no idea whether there was a cover up, how it was all treated. We just don't know, because everything is just now rumor, isn't it? But
because one of the things that came up on Friday is a big conversation, and Laura Lou, thank you for doing some of the heavy lifting here for me. Laura Lou, John Turode made a statement that made Gregg sound either autistic or ADHD. A lot of people are saying that about him. Perhaps doesn't realise his humour could fall flat. One of the things that came up in the conversation on Friday before these stories, and I think we're talking before the Instagram stories that Gregg posted at the weekend that Dina described as digging an even bigger hole for himself. I wasn't surprised I'd heard this, because for me, he's the kind of humour that he kind of engages in is the kind of what I would call, say, the sort of football stadium, the terraces kind of humour between blokes, and he's especially between Millwall fans. So it's about whether you're used to hearing that, not used to hearing that, and whether it's directed at you or not. Someone's just said maybe you didn't experience it, but Nadia isn't saying.
Oh, hang on. Yeah. I'm not saying nobody else. I'm just,
no, not at all.
I'm just not going to say that I did, because I didn't. Yeah. But I 100%. I'm always. I always believe, and maybe that's wrong of me. I believe women first. I don't care. I just do, because I know the way the world is tipped. And but in a court of law, you are innocent until proven guilty. But with these numbers, and I really can't bear it when people say things like, "Oh, but why have you taken so long?" And I'm just not interested in any of that bullshit. But I think it's like my sister said when she came in, talk about digging a hole for yourself. Well, he's dug 2 holes for himself, as she said, because he then comes out and says, well, let's play the stories.
I'm going to play them. So there are 3 stories that he uploaded in order. So I think I've got them in order. Here you go. Let me just make sure the audio is up so we can hear them.
Now, I've been doing MasterChef for 20 years. Amateur, celebrity and professional MasterChef. And I think in that time, I have worked with over 4,000 contestants of all different ages, all different backgrounds, all walks of life. And apparently now, I'm reading in the paper, there's been 13 complaints in that time. Now, in the newspaper, I can see the complaints coming from a handful of middle class women of a certain age, just from Celebrity MasterChef. This isn't right.
Next story.
20 years, over 20 years of television. Can you imagine how many women, female contestants on MasterChef, have made sexual remarks or sexual innuendo? Can you imagine?
Last one.
This is important to me. 20 years of doing Celebrity MasterChef, amateur, professional, Eat Well for Less, Inside the Factory. Do you know how many staff, all different sorts of staff, you imagine the people I've worked with, do you know how many staff complained about me in that time? Eat Well for Less, Inside the Factory, 3 lots of MasterChef. How many staff made a complaint about me? Absolutely none. 0. Seriously.
None that he necessarily knows about, because lots of complaints are coming through from all sorts of areas now. So again, fact checking that, I don't necessarily think that's strictly true. But my God, he's gone for middle-aged, middle-class women.
Everything about what Gregg says in all these stories is the problem that we have. First and foremost, you get to an age where you think, do you know what? I don't have to take this shit anymore. You get to a position where you realize you don't have to laugh at jokes that leave you feeling uncomfortable. You don't have to just pretend something didn't happen just to keep the peace, you know. And actually, Gregg, what I feel sad about this is that he has no idea how those younger women actually feel, because we've all been that younger woman that goes, oh yeah, oh God, and I'm sorry to say, men of this age, you've got no idea what we're thinking about you, really. You've got no idea. You think that you're striding through life and everybody thinks you're really rather nice. Well, guess what? Most of them are going home going, oh God, that guy, I just can't take one more of those jokes. I just can't take one more of him. It's just standing a bit too close. And you know what? We have 2 daughters, 21 and 17. I always forget how old they are. And when they come home, after having to put up with lewd comments and creepiness in clubs, it's always people, men of a certain age. And it's that age. It's that age, because you think that you've got yourself fit and you've done your press ups and you think you're quite hot, and you think that everybody really does fancy you, really, these young girls, because they're giggling. Also, there is a power. There is a power. You're right, Tina. There's a power problem here. That's another thing that so many, well, it happens in offices, it happens in all walks of life. But in show business, there is a hierarchy, right? That's why I always say, if you're on screen and you see something that you think isn't right, you should speak up. If you see a bit of bullying from another presenter, if you see a runner or researcher having to put up with too many of those jokes and that person getting a little bit, you bloody speak up, because there's no way that runner, that researcher, that assistant producer, the girl that gets you your tea, the stylist, the makeup artist, they ain't going to say a thing, because the hierarchy is rigid.
Well, no. And one of the things that came out over the weekend is that one of the, I think Banijay, the production company responsible for many of the shows, I think for MasterChef now, they set up a hotline for complaints or issues for members of staff to use. Which in and of itself is telling you that the production company knew that there was enough of a problem in certain areas of the production for them to need to kind of provide this space for people to talk about, and yet still nothing was talked about. I think the biggest problem, there's 2 issues with this. I just want to chime in and echo what Nads has just said. Young women, specifically in this case, let's talk about young women, but also he's talked about young men as well that he's worked with on the production staff. What Gregg has mistaken for compliance and agreeability in joke and josh and banter is younger people nervously not knowing how to manage inappropriate behavior. And because of his seniority, and because he's actually the judge on one of the most successful brands on television, multi-billion, I mean, it's huge all over the world. Because he's the kind of, if you like, he's the defining sort of face of it, really. He's the argy-bargy. Him joshing, joking, barrow boying, chit-chat and all that kind of stuff, no one in their right mind, in certainly at any junior position or equivalent position, is going to feel safe or right or able to say anything. And in fact, I would say that this kind of banter, low-level banter sexism and suggestiveness is even worse, because it's constantly sitting just below the surface of what can actually be acted on. It keeps going. It's a culture. It's
exhausting to work around that if that's what you're getting every day. And the thing is, you know, when he lists the factory, inside the factory, eat well for eat less, you cannot be so naive as to think that these people aren't a bit like in awe because you're off the telly. You know, you have to understand the power of celebrity. You have to understand that people are nicer to you and do allow more, and you have to take responsibility for that, and you have to be the one that checks your morals all the time. Now, here's the other problem. If all your life, all your professional life, you've made these jokes and people have awkwardly laughed, right? And I say to our girls, try not to. I didn't manage it. I spent certainly all my young life and most of my adult life. And isn't it great to be middle-aged and go, not anymore, matey flip? because it took me to get to middle age to say, I'm not talking to Gregg now, I'm talking to anybody. I can just not laugh now if I don't find it funny. But all my life I laughed because it's embarrassing and you feel awkward and somebody's saying something about their penis and you're at work, or somebody's saying something about the sex act that they do with their partner and you're just like, a young girl doesn't want to hear that. A young girl does not want to hear that.
But if you
a
say,
middle-aged woman doesn't want to hear that.
But if you say it in that environment, they're going to laugh to get away from the
because
awkwardness.
one person laughs and another person laughs. And now, but this is my theory, and this is what I am really worried about. I genuinely think that Gregg believes that he's been done a massive disservice here. People have been great to him. People have laughed. He genuinely doesn't understand what he's done, right? So that's why he's able to do these stories and do these stories in this way with impunity. He's like, everyone's had a great time. We've all had a great time. What worries me about this is he is speaking to a huge portion of the population. There are men of his age that feel, oh, come on, love, I'm only having a bit of a laugh. What's the matter?
I just had to get rid of one just now.
Oh, I'm only having a laugh. What's the matter? Put yourself together. Oh, God, all these posh birds. Oh, God. And that, it's not really about class. It's not about class. It's about, I'm not middle class. I don't know what I'd be called, but it's about having some education on this. That's what he's talking about. And knowing that actually you don't have to accept this. And there are so many men that think like that. Why don't you just shut up and have a bit of laugh? What's the matter with you? Have you lost your sense of humour? Oh, for God's sake, put a smile on it. And, let me just finish. And, mark my words, this will become a successful brand for Gregg Wallace. I bet you anything. He's going to have an army of men that agree with him and feel sidelined and and left out of the story.
So he's going to garner the support of a silent majority of men who want to.
I hope I'm wrong. I mean, but I believe there's going to be. We may even get many of them.
Well, no. I just want to say something quickly. If I was sat in a pub with Gregg, I would literally, in that kind of joshy kind of, I'd look at him and go, "You absolute knob jockey. You've literally gone online and confirmed absolutely everything everyone is saying about you by the way you've gone about it." What he's basically saying is, when he says women of a certain age, he means women, as you rightly just said, who've grown through this, seen through this, and can't fucking
and
take
realise
it anymore.
You don't have to laugh when you don't find it funny. And if somebody's telling sexual, again, we don't know yet. We don't know all the details. I just have to be really, but if this is all true, what people are saying, then you're wrong. You're wrong. And you've made it a million times worse for our industry. But mark my words, there's going to be an army of Gregg Wallaces lining up to sign the membership, join the fitness app.
So this is.
I bet he makes a fortune out of this.
So this is
what makes me so sick.
So this is his opportunity to wave a flag and get all those men who can't stand women of a certain age around him.
Listen, like I said, for the last 17 years, when anybody's asked me about Gregg Wallace, I said, oh, he's a good guy. He's one of those people that changed the path of his life. Like he said to you, this wasn't the world I was supposed to be in.
Yeah.
He was a barrow boy. And, I really admire people who who just chase their dreams. I also admire people that don't chase their dreams. I don't give a fuck. But the point is, he was in a world that he wasn't, as he said himself, was never supposed to be in. And I would have thought over 17 years, you will learn that some of this stuff you just don't say, right? But I think he's lost this demographic. Like on the news last night, he has further gone to offend the audience, the demographic of MasterChef. Demographic of MasterChef's gone for him. It's gone. He's going to be with his people.
Yeah,
his people now. His people.
Yeah, but
and if there was a really sharp PR person, now I'll tell you what, they're going to be ringing him going, okay, and this will become something.
But you know what? I mean, you're right. Unfortunately, when I heard the reports, even from various kind of often BBC broadcasters kind of go in the very middle class voice, I almost slapped my head into my hands because I'm thinking this is what he's talking about. The very thing that he's calling out is the very, it's really hard to battle this kind of thing. I as you rightly say, nothing's been proven and nothing's been confirmed, re the accusations. But what I'm talking about is these posts where he targets women of a certain age. That is silly. You're saying it could end up being a clarion call to action for men who feel unheard and bored of women actually deciding not to take their shit anymore.
And to be understanding. And also I find it very hard. The dinosaurs, they can't shift into, they don't understand. And I get that too. I also do get that. And they feel muted. And there's this, anger towards women that are it's deep sexism just built. It's like the hardest plaque in your teeth. You're going to need all kinds of dental hygienists for years to get rid of it, and it's not going anywhere. And there is an army underneath just waiting for a Gregg Wallace who's got all the fame. He's the acceptable face. He's going to be the acceptable face for these men of his age that are sick and tired of women of my age actually speaking up for themselves.
You think he's going to become an older age potato?
That I didn't want to bring that into it, but I do.
Wow, an older age potato.
An acceptable face of it.
Happy homemaker. If you don't laugh along, you must be stuck up in the opinion of the person making the inappropriate comments. Exactly. I mean, one thing he hasn't done, and this is odd, is read the room in over 20 years of working in the business. That's odd.
But many people, we've got to understand there is a whole generation that still can't read the room. Dina says dinosaurs.
Well, Jackie Vellino's just said there, she said, but we do have different generations. And let's just pause for a moment on that thought. Because we don't tolerate it, but we understand it, say, in our elders. We'd often talk about the fact that our elderly parents of a different generation will say things that aren't appropriate to now. It doesn't mean they're all a bad thing. I think part of what Gregg is leaning on here, and it's dangerous and it's tricky and it's complicated, is he's leaning heavily on the world of what he's describing as essentially political correctness, middle classness.
He's appealing to people that think everything that isn't the way they think is woke.
Yeah.
And like woke is the worst thing in the world. As we say often here, woke is being awake to other people's feelings and other people's nuances.
But can you change that? Can you change that in the older generation? I do think he represents a type of man of a different generation and ilk and origin.
Yeah. I don't want to wipe out a whole generation because there's an awful lot of incredibly awake people of his age. There are many people that choose not to be. There are many people that can't, just literally can't shift their brain around. I don't think this is going to go badly for Gregg. I think it's going to go the other way, unfortunately.
Interesting. Okay, well, we're going to leave that there, and we're going to leave microdosing and sex for another day.
Because we talk too much.
Do subscribe if you haven't. Please do follow us. And if you are one of those sort of dinosaurs, stay with us because it's nice to lock horns.
And you know
in a purely, civilized and polite way.
We love it. We love it. Like to have those conversations with people. We don't want people to agree with us. No. But obviously.
But if you act like an arse in the comments section, you get blocked. Ashley's birthday. Can we sing happy birthday? Was it yesterday, Ashley?
Oh, Ashley. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ashley. Happy birthday to you.
I hope you have a good one or had a good one. Sending you lots of love, Ashley. And guys, thank you for all of your comments. Thank you for all of your contributions. Vlogmas 2 will be landing later.
Don't miss it.
Don't miss it. Bye, guys. I'm just going to wave.